Archie, are Americans saving enough for their retirement?
Well, Rob, I'll contribute some thoughts. I'm Archie Hoxton.
And I'm Rob Hoxton.
And this is Last Paycheck, weekly wisdom to help you retire and stay that way. Welcome back to the Last Paycheck Podcast. We're your hosts, Archie Hoxton and Rob Hoxton. And today we have a topic for you that's sort of a broad topic. We're talking about the state of retirement savings in America. There's a lot of talk about this, a lot of kind of random numbers thrown around. And I think there are a lot of discouraged people out there too, who feel like maybe they're not far along enough. But we want to just kind of bring some data in and talk about where we are as a country on average, and what you can do with that information.
So maybe sort of a litmus test, a way of knowing, how am I doing, right? Relative to everyone else in the country.
Right.
Not that average is anything we should strive for, but we can talk about that.
Yeah. And the average may or may not be adequate, right? I mean, we always talk about this is a very sort of relative topic, whether you have enough saved for retirement or not. It really depends on a variety of factors. So I figured the first thing we could do is talk about some data that's put out by something called the Survey of Consumer Finances. It was last done in 2022. And we can pull some information from that on average retirement savings by age group. So, it's grouped by 10 years. The first age group is everyone under 35.
So from 25 to 35.
Well, everyone under 35.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So for that one, that age group, it's $49,130 saved for retirement. Now, like if you're 25 years old and you have just started saving, you've enrolled in your 401k and you've got, maybe $1,000 in there, don't let that discourage you, because the 35-year-old that was in that group in the survey may have reported a much higher number and pulled that stat way up.
Don't be discouraged. Feel great about that.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't start when they're 25.
Right.
Or before that, right?
Right.
So that's great. Way to go.
Absolutely. The next age group is 35 to 44. And that age group, on average, has $141,520 saved for retirement. The next group is the 45 to 54. They have $313,220. The next group is the 55 to 64. They have $537,560 on average. And the last group is 65 to 74. Of course, this group is really in the most likely already retired category. Mm-hmm. And they have $609,230 on average.
So this must be like household savings, not just one person.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so you may see that and look at these numbers and kind of figure out, well, where am I? Maybe I'm below the average, or I'm above the average. And the thing is, this gives you a sense of where people are, but we'll talk about this later. It really doesn't really matter, because what really matters is the decisions that you make leading up to retirement, and especially during retirement.
And your vision of retirement. And we've talked a lot about what retirement looks like today, and it's not necessarily just finishing work, never having any more income, and living off your savings and Social Security.
Right.
For a lot of people many people want to continue to work in some capacity. Some people will have to work in some capacity, maybe part-time. Others have spouses who don't want them kicking around the house for every day, all day long, and have to and need to go out and work. So, and we can only spend so much time playing golf, right?
Yeah.
Every situation is different, right?
Right. So if you're in the 65 to 74 category, and you're right at the average, you have about 600,000 saved, right? That may be enough. say your neighbor has $1 million saved, right? That might not be enough. So let's say, for example, there's someone with $1 million saved for retirement. That's sort of the old rule of thumb. If you have $1 million, you can retire. But say they spend $200,000 a year. Maybe they had a really great income for their working years and spent $200,000 a year and started saving close to the end of retirement, ended up with $1 million. That probably won't be enough.
It might be.
If
they only live for 5 years, right?
Yeah, right. But if they live for 20 years or 30 years, they might come up short. I mean, barring crazy, outrageous circumstances.
Yeah.
So this is a very relative thing. So when you see where you line up with these averages, keep in mind that everyone has a different set of needs and a different lifestyle when they retire. So there was another survey that was released actually by the CFP board in 2019 that had some they surveyed adults on essentially their attitudes toward retirement and what they're doing to prepare for retirement. And there's a shocking piece of information in that survey, and it was that 48% of adults are actually not saving for retirement at all.
At all. You were talking earlier this week actually about a young participant in a 401k plan, or maybe it was a simple IRA plan, and they had stopped putting money into their plan, and it actually were thinking about taking money out because they didn't really feel like it was making a difference. They were putting money in, they were getting a dollar for dollar match on 3%, but they didn't feel like they were making any progress. Talk about that and kind of how you explain that accumulation chart kind of does like a hockey stick later in life.
Yeah. Well, and this actually kind of, there's another piece of information that came out of the CFP board survey that 26% of the respondents thought the retirement was too complicated.
Retirement saving was too complicated.
And overwhelming, yeah. So I think that one of the reasons why we are maybe a little further behind as a country saving for retirement than we'd like to be, and there are so many people who just aren't saving, it comes from a lack of education, in school, and then in general about how, for example, compound interest works. When you're getting started and say you're young and you're making contributions to a plan and you're seeing it grow very, very slowly, even if you've got an aggressive approach in your investments, a very growth-oriented approach, right? When you're early on and you have a smaller balance in your plan, the investment returns are going to have a really small impact.
Right. Like a $10,000 balance earning 10% gets you $1,000, but a $100,000 balance earning the same gets you $10,000. Now that seems like that really moves the markers. So
yeah,
you can see why people might get discouraged.
Right, because there is a point where you cross over. So early on, like we said, the contributions are that's where all the growth is coming from. Very little of the growth comes from your investments. Much later in life, and it happens right very scarily close to when you are going to retire, the investment returns start to become the higher impact driver of growth over your contributions. So if you have, it's like you said, $100,000 saved and you get a 10% return, that's $10,000. But say you get to 500,000, right? And you get to the 200,000 faster than you got to the 100,000, and then the 300,000 faster than you got to the 200,000. And so it compounds and grows and grows. But when you say you get to 500,000 saved, that same 10% return, that's $50,000.
Yeah,
that's a salary,
which is more than you're putting in.
And that's more than you're putting in.
Yeah.
So that's where I think there is a lot of discouragement because there's just a general lack of education about how compound interest works and sort of the beauty of investing, but the importance of patience and trusting the process.
Yeah. And there's so much on the internet that makes you not want to trust the process.
Right.
Right. Don't trust the government. Don't trust investments. Don't trust anybody. There are just some things like gravity and compounding effect of interest.
Right.
That's irrefutable.
Right.
Make it work for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, this is one of those things that, again, they really ought to be teaching in school. And some places I think they are starting to, but
they ought to be teaching it in school, but we also need to assume personal responsibility here.
Right.
So if you didn't learn this when you were a kid, make sure that your children and grandchildren at least have some of the basic, tenets of finance, and they understand it. Your dad did a lot of things poorly when you were younger, but one thing he did well was teach you how money works.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
That was one of the great gifts of, growing up educationally, was having a sense of how money works and how investing with patience, and starting as early as possible if you can, but if not, trusting that as long as you're doing the right things and you've got a good plan, it's possible. It takes a lot of patience and a lot of discipline. Because the thing is, I do hear a lot of, I would call it retirement despair from people who are, maybe my generation. I'm a millennial, who feel like it's just unattainable. However, and there's a lot of people on social media who are kind of fanning that flame. But educate yourself. It is possible. It just takes a lot of time and patience.
When I used to teach a little class to the civics class, the students over at the local high school, and it was their civics class that I would go in just one day a year. And I did this talk, which I called Chainsaws and Credit Cards. Mm-hmm. They're both great tools, but can be dangerous if misused. Yeah. And we really just talked about basic tenets of financial planning. And one of the examples I gave was that, look, if you forego, if you're 17 or 18 years old in high school, you're a high school senior, and you forego a Big Mac extra value meal once a week and instead put that in a good investment that's compounding, growing on a tax-deferred basis, by the time you reach 65 years old or something, you could be close to a millionaire.
Yeah.
Right? A Big Mac extra value meal.
Yeah. It's because there's enough time.
And you look better in a bathing suit too, incidentally. I did not follow that part of the advice.
Right.
So
that's true. And that is, and I do see out in social media, on the public forums, a lot of people share that kind of tip. And then there is some pushback. However, and it's, understandably, if you're not considering compound interest, the idea of giving up something very, very small, and that making a difference in your financial circumstances seems, for some, I think it seems out of touch. But when we're talking about your entire lifespan and the impact of even small contributions, and how much those contributions can impact 30 years from now, and that consistency, it is meaningful. And,
and if you don't do it, look, let's face it, if you don't do it, you may, not necessarily, but you may be living on Social Security alone, which is maybe a couple thousand, maybe 3,000 at most, probably.
Yeah.
Per month. partly taxed. Also, you got to pay for your Medicare, so, and maybe some part-time income if you're fortunate enough to have your health. So that's a pretty tough living situation. So you really need to think about taking care of the older person you will someday be if you're fortunate.
Right. So, I would say take some time and learn about compound interest. Go online and learn how to calculate time value of money. I mean, this is something there are calculators online, compound interest calculators, and play with that. It's not perfect because there are some assumptions that you have to make, like what kind of investment returns you'll get, which are not necessarily entirely consistent with real investment returns, which are highly variable. But it's a good exercise to get to know what your contributions may one day become. And then, look at your lifestyle and the kind of retirement that you want. Think about, would I be willing to do some part-time work? What other income sources do I have? Do I have a pension? And don't give up hope because you add up your total number of contributions and see a number that's really small and think that's not enough to retire on. Don't forget about the compound interest and spend some time really, working through that, and employ the help of a financial planner if you feel like you need some extra help with your planning. That can go a really long way to making sure that you're not having to live simply on Social Security and cut down your lifestyle. So
well said.
Yeah. So anyway, we hope you enjoyed this. We hope that this gives you some hope and some action items for yourself. If you enjoyed it, remember to leave a comment, like, subscribe, share with your family and friends, and we hope to see you next time. You've been watching Last Paycheck, weekly wisdom to help you retire and stay that way. If you like this show, be sure to hit like and subscribe. Last Paycheck is available anywhere you get your podcasts.